welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm so excited to have so many of you join us today to discuss this subject of leadership and a new take on it. First, I'll introduce myself. My name is Ian Gibson, and I'm the Director of Law and Finance Programs in the Division of Continuing Ed here at UC Irvine. And my role in this is essentially, it started with an issue that I wanted to solve. And I'm definitely excited to introduce our guest speaker, but first I just want to give a little context for our discussion and how this issue led to Armin and myself becoming connected. So my belief is that leadership is an action, not a position. And regardless of what position you may hold within an organization at any level, strong leadership skills are essential to career success. In fact, more than 80% of employers look for evidence of leadership skills on a candidate's resume, and nearly as many seek out indications that that candidate is able to work on a team. And we want to provide people with a way to demonstrate their expertise in that area so that they can achieve their goals. And to solve this problem, my team looked for experts in the field of leadership to partner with in the creation of a modern leadership program. And we really wanted to address just a couple of specific needs that we found leaders in today's workplace were desperately seeking that weren't really answered. Specifically, we wanted to build leadership training that was practical rather than theoretical. Leadership training that was engaging, easy to apply immediately in the workplace, and could be memorable in a way that perhaps if you're studying various theories of leadership, it's not exactly something you can conjure up for most people on the fly. And lastly, we wanted to build some leadership training that could be acquired rapidly in a flexible format that would fit virtually anyone's schedule. So as we went down that pathway, my search led us to this guest speaker today, Armin Pajan. And I'll tell you a little bit about Armin before I bring him on. Armin, he currently oversees and manages all leadership development at the Dorr Institute for New Leaders at Rice University. And for more than a decade, he's been working with hundreds of inspiring leaders across a variety of countries and industries, committed to making themselves and their organizations take to the next level of growth. And most recently, Armin led a top talent and executive development team at Farmers Insurance Group, which is a household name for many of us, but it's a Fortune 500 company with well over 20,000 employees. As far as Armin's educational background, he has a graduate degree in organizational effectiveness from a joint program at Oxford and HEC Paris, and a bachelor's degree in history from UCLA. So with that, I'll welcome you, Armin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian, for having me on this call.
Of course, and I'm thrilled to just dive right into the content. So for our participants, I want to give a little bit of an explanation as to the format of what today's discussion will look like. This is an interview format. I'm going to be asking Armin questions, but we want to hear from all of you as well, so please don't hesitate to use the Q&A feature within WebEx, and I'll be monitoring that and trying to do our best to answer everyone in a timely manner. And I'm really looking forward to seeing just where this conversation takes us. So first, Armin, I think maybe starting out with, if you could describe the root cause of some of the challenges that leaders face in the workplace.
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think the answer is multifaceted. I think the best way we can, capture the essence of what we're talking about here is the rise of what we refer to as a one-click society. In essence, what we're really talking about here is we're entering a new era of transformation where there's an opportunity for all of us, people on this call, for all modern leaders at all levels to step up. We're seeing a confluence of multiple trends. We're seeing a rising consumer expectation. We're seeing changes in demographics. We also seeing changes in technological advancements. And so basically, this one-click economy, we want things fast, we want things now. So even though the notion of change has always existed in human civilization, the speed at which change is happening and impacting our lives is accelerating. And this slide here really captures the essence that we're talking about. You know, in his 2016 book, Thank You for Being Late, you know, Tom Friedman refers to a graph created by a guy who's a CEO at Alphabet Google X division. His name is Eric Astrow-Teller. We basically suggest that, you know, technology is increasing at an ever faster rate before, while human adaptability rises only at a slower, perhaps a linear rate. And these graphs really capture the essence of what we're talking about here. You know, we're seeing the emergence of things like artificial intelligence. We're seeing the emergence of a whole area called Internet of Things, which comprise of smart sensors. You know, these are like, you know, ATM machines who can fix themselves. You know, plane engines who know what might possibly go wrong, and they can place orders. And so we're in essence, technology is going from being a separate aspect of our lives to being an integrated part of our lives. And it's going to be everywhere. And, you know, there's a significant role, I think this goes back to what you were referring to, Ian. There's a significant role that modern leaders can play in this new era to be able to help themselves, the businesses, organizations that they're part of, in the institutions they work for, to help catch up and cope with what's happening. So there's a tremendous opportunity for leadership. However, we believe this adaptation won't be easy.
So speaking of the adaptation, and you know, I think it's pretty clear in what's represented in the graphs as technology hits this, you know, parabolic elbow and shoots up, that we need to do something as individuals and as businesses and just the public at large to avail ourselves of these opportunities. But if we don't, what, in your view, happens to the leaders if they fail to adapt to this new environment?
Well, you know, that's a good question. In 2013, you know, we started interviewing modern leaders. You know, these were individuals who really, you know, excelled at adapting to this new era. And we asked them, you know, what are some of the practices that you're currently doing, which, you know, we can get into in a few minutes. But before that, we ask them, you know, what challenges were you facing? You know, when you encountered this accelerated pace of change, and they kind of we kind of found 4 different patterns, 4 different pain points that these leaders have. You know, some of them talked about losing motivation. You know, these were leaders at all level who talked about how they're in their current environment, everything is negative, there's constant setbacks, and even though, you know, they care about their organization, they care about the field that they work in, they're losing motivation. The second type of leaders that we talked to told us that, you know, in confidence, that they're losing trust in themselves. That, you know, this feels like leading in the dark. Here's a quote from a VP of Human Resources at an industrial product company. And she referred to it as like, I have to make decisions with imperfect information, and I don't know how. I don't know how to come across credible to my team where I don't have enough information. Others felt like, you know, they have to deal with, you know, people in different functions, different departments, at times different cultures, who had dissimilar perspectives and opinions on them. And as they were executing their projects or initiatives, they felt like they're losing support. I think the last pattern that we identified were people who, you know, they were doing their best, they gave it all they had, but they felt like they were losing impact, you know, that they are not.
Armin, it sounds like we might be having a bit of an audio issue. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
my apologies. I hear you now. Yes. So losing impact.
So, what would be intriguing to, I think at this point is maybe, if there's a way we can ask the audience to, tell us which one of these pain points themselves or their teams or their colleagues struggle with the most.
Absolutely, yeah. I know I personally can relate to at least one of these, and I'm going to open a poll right now for our participants. So something should have come up on your WebEx screen. Please let us know which of these symptoms resonates with you most. We want to be sure that we're addressing the needs of those that are joining us on the call today, and I think also, Armin, in your ongoing research in this area, it couldn't hurt to have even more data points. So if you are participating in the call, please do let us know via the poll feature which of these symptoms resonates with you most. Motivation, confidence, support, or impact. I'm going to wait just about another 30 seconds or so. I see results pouring in here. If you have not voted yet, please do indicate in the poll feature which of these symptoms resonates with you most. Just about 10 more seconds, and I'll close the poll. Okay, great. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. Thank you to those that were able to get your information in quickly. And I'll be sharing these results with all the participants here in just 1 second. Bear with me. Okay, wonderful. Sharing the results now. Okay, Armin, are you able to see?
Yeah, it looks like the majority of folks are losing motivation. We have others that are losing support, as well as losing confidence and impact. But it looks like the majority of people, are facing the motivation aspect.
Yeah, and I think the most difficult part for me in this is only being able to choose one box. I don't know if anyone else on the call can relate, but any given day it might be A versus C versus B. So again, thanks to those that participated. So with this information, and obviously with much larger sample sizes that you've conducted in your research, what are the different ways that we can adapt to this environment to cope with some of these pains that we've identified?
Well, we've seen kind of 4 ways that modern leaders are kind of dealing with the accelerated pace of change and the complexity in the workplace. The first phase we like to refer to as a SAGE, and these are individuals who have figured out how to stay motivated and inspired in spite of all the chaos, change, and negativities around them. They're reflectors at their core. They have made sense of their life's journey, and they're very clear about how their past experiences have shaped who they are today. Interestingly, they are continuous, constant learners. They're very curious to constantly get better and improve themselves. They also really understand how their values, help them lead a more purposeful life. And here's the best quote that I can think of is one from Mark Twain that says, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. I would guess sages are very good at answering this question. And they for them leadership is a choice, and a lifestyle, and they take pride in constantly reshaping and recreating who they are. Here's another quote from Deepak Chopra that says, "The most creative act you'll ever undertake is the act of creating yourself." This is, at essence, what sages do best. I think the next phase, or the next way that modern leaders are adapting to this, unlike the sages that are very much inward focused, we have this phase, as we call a Sherpa, who are outward focused. They're interested in stepping into uncharted territory, stepping into the darkness, and with insufficient information, with not having all the information, and they like to be the lead on that, and then invite others to follow them. But in doing so, they exhibit a high level of humility. We find that these individuals have an accurate understanding of their current paradigm, the status quo. They evaluate all the information. They're able to make sense of it, not only for themselves, but for their teams and others around them. So that makes them quality decision makers. But they're also, because of the humility, I think here's a quote from a CEO of a Chinese medical device company that we interviewed. And he said, "I see who I am when I see what I do." So they like to embody what they preach, but they do so with humility. And here's another quote from Ricardo Moody, which some of you may know, is that the moment you think you have charisma, you're finished. So that kind of speaks well to this face, the face of a Sherpa. But Sherpas and sages, as much as they're purposeful, as much as they're visionary and like to step out of the comfort zone, they may not be successful if they're not able to bring other people along. And that kind of moves us to the third phase, third way of adaptation, which we call a diplomat. And you guys might have come across these individuals. They're socially astute. They exhibit a high level of emotional, cultural intelligence. In their conversation, as you hear them talk, they're very solution focused. They kind of transcend. They appreciate interpersonal dynamics, but they have a way of transcending them. They actually have a unique way or unique skill to bring people along, people together, people who work in different departments, who never talk to each other, who are in silos. They have a way of bringing people from different perspectives to the same table. And they're very in tune with social cues. Here's a quote from Peter Drucker that says, the most important thing in communication is hearing what is not being said. And diplomats are very good at detecting the nonverbal. They also, here's another quote from Ms. Kumar, who's a CHRO, Citigroup, is they thrive on ambiguity that comes from dealing with people who are dissimilar to us. Some of us gravitate to people who are like us and are intimidated when we have to deal with people who have dissimilar perspective than us, but actually diplomats enjoy and they thrive at dealing with the ambiguity that comes from people from different cultural backgrounds and perspectives. Interestingly, that kind of moves us to the next phase, which is one of a marathoner. We interviewed a modern leader who started 1,200 retail stores in China for a Fortune 500 company, and she best described the role of a marathoner, toggling back and forth between tactics and strategy when it comes to execution. She was talking about how in the midst of her opening, 10, 15 retail stores, a supplier pulled out, things shifted so quickly, and she had to, with her team, revisit the strategy and the purpose and the why they were interested in expansion, and then be able to move to tactics and execute. So she described this as kind of being a marathoner as well as a sprinter. She had to have enough mental energy and stamina to endure the long run, while she had to make take quick actions. I think this kind of codifies what we mean by marathoner. I think here's a quote that we've included from her. And when it comes to execution, you need to be both a marathoner and sprinter. And that's, I think, what's unique about this phase or this mode of adaptation that we haven't seen in the past. So in essence, Ian, we have 4 phases for a modern leader that we uncovered. We have a sage, we have a Sherpa, we have a diplomat, a marathoner. And, people on the call and people you may come across have different proclivity and inclination in which one of these phases they gravitate towards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to make sure everyone's coming along this journey with us, I want to describe how I understand these, and maybe you can tell me whether I'm on track or if I'm a little off track. So in this untold number of interviews that you had with leaders across the globe, you distilled some of their best practices, and then the nomenclature we're looking at here, these 4 phases, as you call it, are essentially clusters of traits that you wanted to give an identity so they could be more easily recalled and understood and perhaps even transitioned on the fly, depending on the leadership scenario one finds himself in. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's kind of an ease of understanding, ease of retention, and then also, talking about these personas and faces in real life. People tell us that they have an easier time recalling, remembering this information. They're actually able to better apply it in their lives.
Wonderful. So speaking of applying this in our lives, and the callers who are seeing the notions that you have to describe these faces for the first time, I'd be curious to find if any of them resonate more than another with those of our participants. So I'm going to initiate another poll here in just a minute, asking which face do you currently exhibit more of? The poll should be open now, so please do input your answer when possible. I know for me personally, it's a combination again. Difficult to choose just one. I think it depends on the situation, and I think it also depends on maybe the need that your particular, the culture of your workplace, where your strengths of your coworkers might be, could help inform. Assuming that one is able to sort of switch between faces if they have those skills. I think throughout a day, any given day, I might wear more than one of these identities. Is that how you feel as well, Harman?
Yeah, and you obviously throughout the day we wear many of these faces, and we may, like for example, I'm very good at putting on a face of a sage, but when it comes to a diplomat, sometimes I struggle. As much as I want to put on that face, it's a difficult face for me, more difficult face for me to put on than others.
Maybe that's another way to utilize these learnings, right?
Yeah.
Is that which you exhibit most is great. That's kind of like identifying a strength, but perhaps the face that you have the least experience with would help steer you in a certain direction to say, can I upskill on some of these traits? Might there be some strategic benefit to me in being able to wear that diplomat hat under a certain situation?
Yeah, I've come across, like, for example, marathoners who are so good at execution, getting things done, but as soon as things get uncertain and they have to play the role of a Sherpa, they get paralyzed.
Right. Okay, well, thank you to all the participants who did weigh in on this poll. I'm going to be sharing the results here in just 1 minute. So it looks as though we've got a fair number of sages and diplomats on the call with us, although all four faces are represented.
Yeah, wonderful.
Are you able to see these results, Armin?
Yeah, so I'm seeing more folks, wanting to or playing the role of a sage, followed by diplomat as well.
Yeah, interesting. So with this, all of this in mind, I'm going to transition to the next question here for you, which is, what are the different best practices or next practices that successful leaders adopt? Which perhaps in another words is, okay, let's say I understand the concept of these four phases. What do I do with it? How is this actionable?
Well, the modern leaders that we've talked to have, for them, leadership is no longer a nice to have, is a must have. And for them, leadership is a lifestyle, and they have, at some point, in their career, they've made a conscious choice to, take on one of these phases in their attempt to adapt to this new era. And but for them, whatever they do, they see it as a constant practice. They share with us some practices that they do, but they're very mindful about those practices. Here we have a handful. This is not a comprehensive list, just some examples of what some of these modern leaders do. Like, for example, we've talked to some sages who are very good at having a practice on a regular basis. They draw a lesson from memorable or emotionally charged events that they encounter in their lives, and they make sure that they learn from those crucible experiences, and they know how to apply them in the future. We've seen Sherpas who are very clear on steps they need to take to lead in an era of uncertainty, and they have ways and methods that they use to move initiatives forward and deal with uncertainty. We've seen diplomats who are very good at finding solutions and are very in tune to noticing dissimilarities and having a way to reach agreements. And we've seen marathoners who are, again, very conscious of the challenge that they're dealing with. They have a way of kind of maintaining their energy, especially their mental energy, high. And even though they're working in environments where they may not be as appreciated by others. So here's just a list, a sample of practices, and kind of, I guess my invitation to all of us is we each have our own practices, and to kind of share it with others and become more conscious about some of these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'll remind everyone on the call right now, the Q&A forum is up and running. Please feel free to drop any questions in that you might have, and we can be sure that Armin addresses them. But while folks are thinking about that, one can definitely take these four phases and first look to themselves to say, okay, so from within, which one of these might be my natural proclivity? Which one might be the one that I'm aspirating? My aspirations lead me toward, let's say, being more of a diplomat or a sage, whatever it might be. But you can also take these practices and use them to identify the leaders within the organization that you're currently with, right? We can look outward toward perhaps our direct supervisors or the C-suite in whatever organization we might be a part of, or even at a more broad level, maybe even political leaders and other titans of industry. And see how they might fall within one of these four clusters of traits. So through that lens, Armin, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm curious, can you think of any other, maybe some political leaders or some other well-known business leaders that you could maybe use this system to help identify? So let's say, for example, like a Steve Jobs, or maybe I didn't want to bring up President Trump, but maybe he has a certain leadership style that could be aligned with this system. So not limiting you to those two examples, but something along those lines, just to see your way of thinking around identifying others as potential sage Sherpas, diplomats, and marathoners.
Yeah, so I haven't met Steve Jobs, but I met Elon Musk, and he's definitely, I would refer to him as a Sherpa. He's somebody who's definitely an innovator. He's comfortable in stepping into situations where others might feel very uncomfortable, and he can lead innovation. He can lead project. He's just extremely comfortable, and that comes with a lot of confidence. But at the same time, these individuals have an accurate and realistic view of the available information. They've made sense of it, over time. So when you hear them talk, they have a certain level of charisma. You want to listen to them because you felt like they've gone beyond just giving you information. They have a certain level of wisdom that you want to listen to.
Yeah, I think
as it relates to as sage. Actually, when I was at UCI a couple of years ago, I met Lima Gbowee, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work in Liberia and leading that social movement. And she at some point seen what was going on around her, which was all negative. She had to turn inward and kind of get in touch with what was important to her, because most people around her were living in fear, we're living in anger, we're living in violence, and so she had to turn inward and figure out what's important to her, and that kind of gave her the courage and motivation to speak up and to step out of her comfort zone.
Yeah, those are some great examples. I'm wondering here too if we're looking at these four phases of a modern leader in terms of their strengths generally, or their effective practices. In your research, was part of this, or and maybe I'm off base, did you identify common weaknesses?
We've seen. I'm sorry, I missed the last part. Sorry.
No, I'm just curious if there's a dark side to, let's say, being a diplomat.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and I think each of these phases, whenever we underdo them, you overuse them, or use them in the wrong situation, can turn into a blind spot. I can think of individuals who they're so reflective, as a sage, and they're so self-aware. But when we put them in front of others, they lack situational awareness. They're unable to kind of translate that high level of self-awareness into understanding other people. I've seen Sherpas who, as visionary and innovative as they are, they suffer what we call from a planning fallacy, which marathoners are great at. So they underestimate what it takes to execute and get things done. So they overpromise and underdeliver. They're kind of like a visionary that has great ideas and can take you only to a certain level, and then nothing gets done, or insufficient level of execution gets done.
Yeah, that's helpful to know. Might make me feel a little bit better about myself to know that some of these iconic leaders could have blind spots. So we did get a question that I want to be sure we address from Kurt. Thanks so much for submitting this. It says, does a good leader need all 4 of these phases in order to lead effectively?
I don't think so. I think good leadership is all about being our best self. And you know, when you talk to all of these modern leaders, none of them claim to be perfect. None of them claim that they have all the answers. You know, none of them. You know, they're continuously learning, and I think, but they've made leadership their lifestyle. They've made a choice to be a leader. You know, they've at some point embraced that leader identity, and they're very curious about it. They want to constantly grow in different ways. You know, in different ways that they express that. I think the expression of leadership is not as important as that leader identity piece.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks again for the question, Kurt. I'll just remind all the callers the Q&A forum continues to be wide open. Don't hesitate to submit questions. I have one more for you, Armin. I'm wondering about, and that is in conceptualizing these 4 phases. Is it that are they on a spectrum of sorts? Like, I know you've a couple times now indicated that maybe a sage is more inward facing and a Sherpa might have more situational awareness. One could think of that as a spectrum, or do they overlap in just as we sort of compartmentalize these 4 archetypes in our mind? Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of look at it that way. I think the sages and the marathoner have more of an individualistic, I guess, perspective. You know, sage is interested in his or her self-level awareness, and marathoner is able to manage his or her level of energy in toggling back and forth, you know, between strategy and tactics and getting things done. Diplomats and Sherpas have more of a other perspective, has more of a social components. You know, Sherpas are good at inspiring others, you know, inviting others to have a shared purpose and a shared vision. And diplomats, again, kind of take their social responsibility seriously as it comes to bringing everybody to the same table, reaching agreements. So you're right in that. I think sages and Sherpas also have, what they have in common is that they're very purpose-driven. You know, they have purpose in common, and marathoners and diplomats are very interested in impact. You know, however, you know, their understanding of impact could be different. For a diplomat, you know, impact could mean social success and everybody reaching consensus or reaching some level of agreement. So social cohesion is important for them, for diplomats. Marathoner are more action-oriented, and they view that as success. But I think diplomats and marathon are more, if there was a spectrum, they're more on the impact side, versus sages and Sherpas are more on the purpose side, if that was the spectrum we were looking at.
Yeah, that's helpful. Clearly, we're just scratching the surface of of all the work you've done in this space and what each of these phases really means. I've got one more question, and unfortunately, we're going to have to make this the last question. But anyone who has a question maybe later on or wants to get in touch, we'll have contact information on the last slide, so please stick with us. So we got a question from Claudia, and that is, how do you cultivate your leader identity?
Myself?
Or maybe it's if one has aligned or found that, okay, maybe I'm more of a sage than the others, or at least that's how I'm self-identifying with the information I have now. How do I cultivate that further? If I want to go from a level 7 sage to a level 10 sage, what sort of practices do you recommend, or how does one even begin that journey?
I think, you know, it depends on where the individual is, but I think it starts with, you know, self-awareness. You know, you usually we use, you know, psychometric assessments to give the individual some level of self-awareness. I think once the individual feels comfortable with that, we ask the individual to get feedback from those that know the individual where and surrounds them, whether in their personal and professional lives. And that kind of starts giving us perspective about who we are as a person, which I think is maybe 5 to 10% of the work. And then, some people are happy with that, kind of knowing that much about themselves. There are others who want to maybe go up to 20, 25%. And those are, individuals then have to, it's because there's so many different aspects to being a human. There's an emotional aspect, there's a cognitive aspect, there's a behavioral aspect, as well as a spiritual aspect. So they develop some level of understanding about these territories, and then they're able to kind of see aspects of themselves when they kind of explore. So they kind of are able to understand their inner map, and then once they understand it, they're able to navigate. And then all of a sudden they see that they're actually bigger than they thought. That actually their sense of self, just by that level of understanding and that they're being playful about playing with different aspects of themselves, has grown. So they reach 30, 35%. And then, those individuals who are at that level, then they kind of see that, I no longer am not limited by these habits that I've been demonstrating for so long. I can explore, I can become someone else. And that goes back to the quote from Deepak Chopra, which is really they start reshaping who they are. They're playing with their identity, and they're able to show up differently in different situations effectively. And they are able to wear these different faces and be extremely effective. And people tend to like them. They're charismatic when they need to, and then when they don't need to speak up, you see them being quiet. So you see them kind of being versatile and nimble in who they are, and they have a fluid sense of identity, and their sense of self has grown tremendously. But I would say maybe 10 to 15% of the population is interested in that kind of a 70, 65% self-awareness. Most individuals can become very effective by just becoming 10 to 15% aware of who they are, kind of maybe taking a university course, taking some validated scientific assessments, doing some sort of a 360 or feedback from others, and really that is enough for most people to get them functionally successful in the workplace.
Right. And since you mentioned taking a leadership course, that's a nice transition into what I'd like to discuss next. Just to quickly address a couple of other questions that came up in the chat and the Q&A. This video is being recorded. Anyone who is a participant will be sent a link to the recording once this concludes, or I think sometime in the next 24 hours you'll receive an email link. So don't worry if we went by a little quickly. You'll have the ability to rewatch this as often as you like. And if more questions come up over time, we are here to help. And for those that really do want to dig into, like I'm looking at Elizabeth's question about how to borrow from these different leadership practices that they're less naturally drawn to and to accomplish their goals, we've got a solution for you. So real quickly, I'd just like to describe the course that Armin helped us develop, and the one that he's actually teaching starting this January. It's called Leading from Within, and it's part of a certificate or a specialized studies program that we're offering here at the Division of Continuing Ed at UC Irvine. It's called Modern Leader, and it's a 3-course series that we developed closely with Armin and some other experts in the leadership field. And it's designed to be a transformative learning experience. I think what you've seen in the last 45 minutes or so, this is brand new content. There's nowhere else you can go to learn about the 4 phases. Armin is the guy. Him and his research team uncovered these after years of work and are creating it, and there's literally no other place you can go to learn this material, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to partner with Armin to bring this kind of content to UC Irvine continuing ed students. So for those of you that want to dig deeper, really understand how to maybe level up within the FACE that they most naturally align with, or maybe those looking to build up skills in those that are more foreign to them in terms of the FACEs, I absolutely encourage you to join Armin this January to really engage in this 4 FACEs concept, as well as some other things, many other things actually that will be coming up in that course. And we're so excited to have that. Again, starts in January. All of you will be given a link in the email that's sent automatically, I believe, to bring you directly to the webpage to learn more about that program. And some of you may be even automatically directed there upon closing this webinar. So lastly, I just wanted to conclude with a little bit more information around the Division of Continuing Ed here at UCI. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, the UCI Division of Continuing Education provides UC quality education at a global scale so that learners from virtually anywhere can develop the professional skills necessary to advance their careers. And we have very proudly delivered exceptional educational experiences to more than 1 million learners. That's right, 1 million from over 115 countries. So it truly is a global platform that we're thrilled to be a part of and to share this kind of unique content. And UCI, more generally, for those that might not be familiar, it's ranked among the top 50 universities nationally and in the top 10 of all public universities, which signifies our well-known, uncompromising standard of excellence. And that's a standard that I think absolutely carries through into this Modern Leader program and is hopefully obvious with the involvement of experts like Armin. So with that, I want to thank all of you who participated in this webinar today, this info session. I think the questions were great. I know I learned a lot. I hope others did as well. And Armin, I can't thank you enough for spending this time with us and sharing your learnings. It's been a wonderful experience for me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, absolute pleasure. Thank everyone again for participating. I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar now. If you have more questions about this content, or if you want to learn more about the program, there's contact information on the slide in front of you right now. Francine Berg would be more than happy to field calls and emails. So we hope to hear from you. So thanks, everyone, and I hope we'll see you next quarter.